Welcome into Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for finding us on your favorite podcast app. You can also find us on Dash Radio every single weeknight at 7 p.m. Download the Dash Radio app. Search for Nothing But Net. It is free. Also, my new show on OnSideRadio.com resumes on Monday. That's every day, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. 5reasonsports.com. That's where you find Brady Hawk's latest articles on the Miami Heat, but we cover all the other local teams in town. And we also want to thank our sponsors. Make sure you check them out. Supporting them supports us, including the Seltzer Mayberg Law Firm. They've been with us since the very beginning. They're based in North Miami. If you've been hurt in a car accident or a slip and fall, call the law offices of Seltzer Mayberg. That's at 855-5000-LAW, 855-5000-LAW, or go to onecalllegal.com. That's ONE. calllegal.com. If you mention 5 Reasons, you'll get a free consultation. That's right, a free consultation by mentioning 5 Reasons. They got 24/7 availability. They'll make sure you'll work directly with an attorney to get you the compensation that you deserve. Again, it's the Seltzer Mayberg Law Firm. They cover more than just the slip and falls and the car accidents. If you have an immigration issue or anything else, they have an attorney for you. Call 855-5000-LAW. And now, today's episode.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5
on the floor.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily show on the Miami Heat and the NBA featuring Ethan Skolnick with Alex Toledo and Greg Sylvander, part of the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
All right, welcome back to Five on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. Unexpected episode. We planned on going last night. We pushed it back a day, and there is news. It's not major news because nothing has happened yet, but one of the players we've talked about on Five on the Floor as a possible Heat target is John Collins of the Atlanta Hawks. If you're not that familiar with him, played at Wake Forest, but before that, he played at Cardinal Newman in the West Palm Beach area, so he's from this area. There's a video that's circulating out there on Twitter he did with Trae Young, where he was asked if he wanted to play for any other team, what would that team be? And he basically said, well, he didn't basically said, he said the Miami Heat. And then today, a report from Sam Amick, who we trust, one of the better reporters covering the NBA, Sam reported that the Atlanta Hawks are open to trading John Collins. Now, they did not work out an extension with John Collins. Last year, he averaged 20 and 12. This year, his shooting line is pretty tremendous, actually. I think it's 54. His splits are like 54% from the field, 41% from three, and close to 85% from the line, while averaging about 18 and 9 on the season. So he's an elite young big, 23 years old, but the Hawks don't seem to see him as part of their future. And, of course, the Miami Heat's biggest hole is at the 4 spot next to Bam Adebayo, local guy. So this started our text string flying today. Greg, why is he an attractive option to the Heat?
I mean, you just laid it all out there. And I just think that the fit next to Bam, like we talk so much about all these targets and Oladipos and Beals and yes, I mean, obviously Bradley Beal is unbelievable and he's out of this world. But when you really look at the roster as presently constructed, John Collins is the type of player that fits next to Bam, provided that a few things unfold, which we're going to talk about. Like he's the perfect fit. I feel like that he is the type of player that they can mold into the right type of defensive fit. And then just the offensive stuff he brings, the athletic stuff he brings, the timeline that fits well with this younger team. It would show a commitment to like a build that they're going to stick with. And I think that there's something to be said for that. And I also think that Jimmy, despite everyone always looking at how old he is in his timeline, he would actually be, he would be about that kind of situation. So I'm all in on John Collins.
Alex, again, when we talk about what the Heat need more, I think most of us come to the conclusion that a player next to Bam. I don't know if it has to be a 4, it has to be a 5, but it has to be a player next to Bam. I mean, they went through a number of different options last year. Myers Leonard was the starter, and then Jay Crowder came in, but not as many options as they did have this year. And they pretty much played 8 different guys next to Bam. They've kind of settled for now on Kelly Olynyk, but he's in the last year of his contract. We know he's inconsistent. And then, it's been Iguodala, it's been maybe Jimmy at times, it's been they tried Mo Harkless, and there just doesn't seem to be a great option there for them. Just on the surface, if I could say to you, you could have a young big to play next to Bam with what seems to be somewhat of a complementary skill set, and we'll talk about that more, or you could have a bucket getter in the backcourt? A guy like an Oladipo, somebody like that. Who do you choose?
I think you already know my answer from the text string, but I lean towards the guard. And it's not necessarily about the position thing, because I think we could all agree, like you said, is having somebody next to Bam. And, that's kind of what matters. That's where the obvious hole is this season. But as far as maxing somebody, I would rather go for somebody who I think can raise the ceiling of this team. And maybe John Collins can. I think John Collins, by the way, is a really talented and really has been a really productive player in the NBA in his time in Atlanta. But I'm just not as sure about the fit. And then, we're going to get into the price point of what it would cost to trade for him and what that would look like. And then, the fact that he's going to expect something near whatever his max money is. I'm just not as sure about the fit to that degree. You know what I'm saying? So, I'm not sure about Collins on defense. And that's what really troubles me, because I think that's kind of something that they should be looking at for that position as far as a long-term fit, is somebody who can really help them to turn into a better defensive team in the playoffs, who could do multiple things. Maybe Collins could turn into that guy. I'm just not nearly as sure about it. I think he's a really talented offensive player. And, I was talking about it with Nikias, and he made a really good point, like he always does. Shout out to Dunker Spot podcast once again. Collins will be nice for when Bam switches out onto a perimeter player, and, he could be the weak side rim protector, which he's okay at. But in general, he's not really a 4 or a 5 on defense, and that's kind of what troubles me about him. The rest of his game is really, really, really intriguing to me, because he's a great scorer. He's a very good rebounder. They could use help there. But having to give up guys like Duncan or Tyler Hero, whatever the package would look like, and then having to max him to be your long-term fit, I'm not there yet. I would have to see it first, and it's hard. It's a really interesting conversation.
Well, let me start with a couple of quick counters, and then I'll go to Greg, and we're going to talk about, as you said, price point. There's really 2 price points to discuss, what it takes to get the player and what you have to pay the player. Okay, but as far as the defense thing, the only counter that I would offer to that is he seems to have the athletic ability to play defensively. I don't know that he's necessarily been coached to play defensively. And I remember a conversation that I had with Chris Bosh late in his Heat tenure, where he basically told me I was a terrible defender when I came to Miami, and I didn't even know if I could be a good defender. And then it took me a year to realize how bad a defender I was, and another year to figure out I could be a good defender. And we know that Chris Bosh ended up becoming maybe the best pick and roll defender in the entire league. I'm not saying you can do that with every defensive player, but it does seem to me that John Collins has more of a defensive skill set than maybe a Duncan Robinson does. There's more to work with there, I would think. I mean, the athletic ability is clearly there. He plays above the rim defensively. I don't see why they couldn't turn him into maybe not a plus defender right away, but at least an average defender. But the other thing, going through the numbers, Greg, I mean, you're talking about a guy from the 2017 draft that they considered drafting. They took Adebayo instead. You look at all the metrics. Bam Adebayo has been, I mean, you can argue he's been the better big because, again, more contribution to winning. But statistically, the only big who's been there with him has been John Collins from that draft. I mean, the other guy's Jarrett Allen, who was basically given away. I think we agree that Bam's a better player than Jarrett Allen. But my thing is this. Okay, and this is why I wasn't all in on Harden, all right? First thing, Harden's 31. Second thing, Collins is a little bit so Collins is closer to Bam's timeline at 23, okay? So you're building with the two of them together, but he's good enough now to help Jimmy get over the hump at this stage. I'm looking at the big options for them over the next 2 years that could become available with this kind of skill set that would potentially fit next to Bam, who's already proven it in the league to a degree. Those guys don't exist. I mean, Lauri Markkanen is not going to give you defensively what Collins potentially could. So from that, what is the baseline, Greg, for what you would give up, and what is the top end?
Wow, this is where the conversation gets particularly interesting. Because so he only makes $4.1 million. And in my opinion, it makes the most sense to try to acquire him now versus wait until the offseason and do a sign and trade. And there's a lot of implications and moving parts there, and nothing is impossible, like, make no mistake of that. But I think it is much cleaner for them if they have the ability to acquire him now. And the interesting part of that is that the Heat actually have a few young players that don't have these really large salaries that would make salary matching an issue, and they would be able to put together a package. So then the question becomes, like, how good of a package are you willing to put together? For me, from their perspective, I would imagine they would want Precious. I feel like having a young big to put back into their pipeline in place of John Collins, even though they're already crowded in the front court, I would imagine that would be a starting point there. And then to me, I think we probably land on the Duncan Robinson conversation because I don't see them even thinking. They wouldn't even consider Tyler Hero for John Collins. It's not even remotely a possibility. So it would be about Duncan Robinson and who would you rather pay? You know, he turned down a $90 million contract. John Collins did. Who are you willing to pay 18 to 20 million? Do you want it to be Collins or do you want it to be Duncan?
Okay. Wouldn't Collins be demanding more than that though? That's kind of where it's also been bothering me here.
Correct. No, there's no doubt about it. His max would be much higher. And that is, another thing that gets weird with the sign and trade stuff, because you're hard capped. And then like, if you want to keep other guys, it can get super tricky.
So to me, then the thing becomes, right, besides that point that maybe Collins would be slightly more expensive to me, which is a secondary point other than does Collins' offensive impact, which is what he's bringing you, and the rebounding, of course, is that going to help you more in the short term than Duncan Robinson? And that's the part where I'm really like, I'm not sure, because I think Duncan Robinson has elite offensive impact, especially for somebody that's not, a superstar or an all-star type player. For, that type of level of guy that he is, I think he has that impact as it is. Whereas Collins, you're kind of hypothetically talking about how it may or may not come true. I just don't see it, because to me, if you take away that threat, like I would love to have Collins there and Robinson. Like that would be awesome, right? And again, like the defense stuff comes into issue, but that's going to be a problem if you trade Duncan or not, right? And like if you had them together, that would be great. But if you're taking away that level of shooting and your spacing all of a sudden relies on Tyler, who is a good shooter, you still have Goran,
but it's not the same. No, you're right. Like I get it. Like especially this season, like in trying to like make a run now to unplug Duncan from what this system is built around and the things that they do. And when he's firing on all cylinders, how dangerous it all becomes. I think that that's a really bold move, particularly when you don't know how Collins will fit. So I'm leaning in the direction of saying, as much as I think it's a fun transaction to think about, I don't know that it makes a ton of sense basketball wise if it includes Duncan. And then at that point, I don't know that you can get him. And then, we're kind of back to square one where I can't shake the feeling that we may go down the road of a really patient trade deadline, and then they see if they can consolidate guys to go get a Bradley Beal or a bigger name. I don't know. I don't think that these fringe moves, the more I've thought about it, I don't think that they're going to happen.
Well, but see, this is more than a fringe move. I mean, I think there's a place between a fringe move, like going to get a Derrick Rose and going to get a guy who may commit a max deal to. Like, I mean, and look, the problem in the NBA is always, when we talk about max deals, there are max players and then there are players who get maxes. And the problem is that we see a lot of players who get maxes. You got a LeBron James gets a max, and that's a max player. You get a Giannis who gets a max, and I'm not saying that the numbers are all the same, but I'm just saying certain guys get maxes, and they are maxes in real life. They're carry a franchise players. I don't know that this is a carry a franchise player, but then the reason I could see the Heat getting all in on it is what I said earlier, which is, okay, who are you going to pair with Bam? Like, what is the piece out there? Is it Lauri Markkanen? I mean, I don't.
No.
Is it right? Or are you just going to keep patching this position? Or do you believe it's Precious ultimately, but you won't even play Precious with Bam now? So this is why I don't want to say the Heat are desperate, but they're kind of desperate for a player like this. Okay. And that's why I might be more all in it. All right. We're going to talk. We got one more part of this that I want to get to, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it in future days. Before we do, though, before the weekend, sign up for prizepicks.com. Use the code 5 FIVE. Everybody on our network's having a really good time with this, except me, because I've been losing lately. But give it a shot. Go to prizepicks.com. You can play basketball. You can play, well, during football season, you could have played that. When baseball season starts, you can do that. But you can even play highlight now. You can play tennis. We've got guys who are playing soccer. You can combine athletes from different sports. Essentially, all you got to do is go over or under their fantasy projection and then pair them with other athletes. Then decide you want to do a power play and go all in. You want to hedge a little bit and play flex play. Just take $20, sign up, deposit. Prizepicks.com. This is the new way to play daily fantasy. They got the single stat categories. If you think Jimmy's going to go over 23.5 points, you go over. Think he's going to go under, you go under. And then you can do the same with Bam's rebounds and on and on. So go to prizepicks.com and use the code 5. All right. The one other part to this that we've sort of gotten into a little bit today is we started talking about Oladipo some in that context. And I just, Heat fans are throwing out all these crazy possibilities. Can you get Collins and Depot? And Depot's hurt now again. I continue to hear that the Heat are not really in on Oladipo. Okay, that there's still a lot of the same concerns there were before. But Alex, let me ask you this: like you said, you're more in on the scorer. My attitude on scorers is that they're easier to find. Okay, than sort of bigs with elite skill sets who can also step outside, can play the modern game, can step outside, can play above the rim. I mean, is Oladipo the level of player that you would say would be more worthy of potentially a max deal than John Collins?
So to me, it's not about the scoring aspect alone. To me, I'm prioritizing the two-way player aspect. I've been. That's the part to me. And maybe it's ideal. Maybe it's more of a philosophical thing than anything. Like, I just think they really need to fix that perimeter defense. And if they can get a guy who can function as multiple things for them, including a point of attack defender who isn't limited, extremely limited as an offensive player like Avery Bradley is, who can pretty much just shoot and occasionally come off a screen and shoot. I think Oladipo will be, in theory, a really nice addition. I understand he hasn't been all that efficient for Houston this year, but they don't have a lot of spacing in that offense. I saw that when they played the Rockets the other night, and Oladipo would not be playing that role where he's just getting, he's kind of just watching John Wall dribble. And then when he does get the ball, he's setting high pick and roll and just kind of doing his own thing. Like, we know that's not the offense that the Heat run. They're moving the ball around, and he wouldn't be that type of guy. So that's why I just kind of like the idea of somebody who wouldn't change everything for them. Maybe you could acquire him without having to give up a Duncan Robinson. I don't know. Maybe not. But I would prefer somebody who can cover up their actual problems first and foremost and give you the ceiling raiser. I'm not nearly as sold about the defensive potential with Collins as you guys are. Maybe that changes, and maybe I'll be wrong about it. Like I said, the weak side rim protection when Bam switches, it would be nice. Like, they don't have a great version of that right now. But as far as a switching four who can do Crowder stuff and maybe more, like a Harrison Barnes, a Thad Young, PJ Tucker, he isn't that type of player. And I'm just not sold about trading for him at that price point. Maybe I sound ridiculous because I wouldn't have said this about Duncan Robinson perhaps a year and a half ago. Like, he was an athlete, but the guy that he's turned into, I'm just worried about trading him for somebody that I'm not sure about the fit with like that.
Yeah, Collins, the other thing is conditioning. And I think that sometimes we underestimate when guys get in the Heat's conditioning program and get in different shape and build their bodies, what they can do defensively and what might happen. But when you go back to Depot, this is why I flinch. And even though the two-way stuff you mentioned is all viable, and I'm with you, like, that two-way potential is why he's been such an intriguing option. The point of attack defense, the offensive creation. But when you have Coach Steven Silas saying that Oladipo is undergoing tests to determine the severity of the injury and it's related to the foot/ankle, I just start to get weirder and weirder about thinking about committing anything to Victor Oladipo. I feel like this is getting to be a precarious situation with him as he heads towards free agency.
Yeah, I think it's tough with Oladipo. Like, this obviously makes it a lot tougher, the injury stuff, because we don't have any read on that. And what you're telling me probably doesn't sound great. That's, the Oladipo stuff, is, like I said, is in theory with a healthy Oladipo who's recovering and kind of getting better and better in a lesser role and just kind of focusing on the defense and adding an offensive punch. But in general, I'm just not as sure, man. Like, I think Collins looks really, really great when he's rolling to the rim. And, he can shoot. He can really shoot. But he's taking about 3.5 threes a game. He's not exactly a volume shooter. And if you're just going to have him sitting at 3 a lot of time and he isn't rolling to the rim, I wonder if you're going to get diminishing returns and he's just going to end up averaging 13 and 9. And it's not just about the box score production, but if he's going to give you 13 and 9 and the defense isn't great because that's just kind of the way their offense flows, is that going to be worth Duncan and a max slot?
think we need to do an entire episode on Duncan. We've been saying that for about a week. I think we'll do.
I feel like we've done like 7 episodes on Duncan
but
with other conversations.
I think we really need to break it down, like because every conversation we have about pretty much any other player is, do you include Duncan? And I keep saying, are they going to pay Duncan? So I feel like we need to evaluate that. I'm thinking maybe we bring Bobby Marks on or somebody like that to kind of talk about that. So that'll be our goal this week, to get Bobby or
Andy Ellisberg.
I like that to talk about it. All right. Well, yeah, actually, that's not a bad idea.
Ever heard of him?
Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Ethan Skolnick. Obviously, follow all of us. We'll be back over the weekend. They play Utah, so we'll obviously have coverage of that. Check out the YouTube channel as well. PrizePicks.com. Use the code 5. And if you have any kind of legal issue, reach out to the official attorneys of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, the Seltzer Mayberg Law Firm. Again, you can find them at onecalllegal.com.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network.